The winter of 1876 bit harder than most in Reidsville, Colorado, the day Abigail Jameson watched her family's wagon disappear into the snow-dusted horizon, leaving nothing but wheel tracks that would soon vanish like her reputation. At 22, she stood alone outside the town's modest hotel, her calico dress and thin wool shawl offering little protection against the biting December wind. The letter crumpled in her hand contained words that had sealed her fate. Shame, disgrace, no longer welcome. Abigail pulled her shawl tighter, her auburn hair whipping across her face as she fought back tears. 3 days ago, she'd been the respected daughter of Jeremiah Jameson, the town's prominent banker. Now she was the subject of whispers behind gloved hands, of sidelong glances as she walked the boardwalk. The hotel's door swung open behind her. "Miss Jameson, I'm afraid I need that room. With your situation, well, it wouldn't be proper for you to stay any longer, Mrs. Finch," the owner's wife, couldn't quite meet her eyes. "I understand," Abigail said quietly, though she didn't. How could a false accusation tear her life apart so completely? "I'll collect my things." 30 minutes later, Abigail stood on the street with a single carpet bag containing everything she now possessed in the world. The town had believed Walter Blackwell's story without question, the wealthy rancher's son claiming she'd tried to seduce him, trap him into marriage, when in truth she'd fought off his unwanted advances behind her father's bank. Her denial meant nothing against his family's influence, and her own father had chosen his business relationships over his daughter's word. The wind picked up as the afternoon waned. With nowhere to go and only $3 to her name, Abigail began walking toward the edge of town. Perhaps the widow Hollister might take pity on her. Before she reached the end of the main street, fat snowflakes began falling, quickly turning into a swirling curtain of white. "Miss, you'll freeze before you make it a mile in this." The deep voice cut through the howl of the wind. Abigail turned to see a tall figure on horseback, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, shoulders broad beneath a heavy duster. "I'm quite all right," she called back, though her shivering betrayed her. The horseman dismounted in one fluid motion. As he stepped closer, Abigail could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jawline softened by kind eyes the color of summer grass. "Aaron Parker," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat. "My ranch is just north of here." "I couldn't help but notice your predicament." Abigail lifted her chin. "My predicament, Mr. Parker, is none of your concern." A smile touched his lips. "No, madam, it isn't. But that storm coming in is everyone's concern, and you being caught in it would weigh on my conscience something fierce." She hesitated, glancing back at the town that had so quickly turned its back on her, then to the road ahead disappearing into the swirling snow. "I know about what happened," he said quietly. "Town this size, word travels fast." Her cheeks burned with humiliation. "Then you know I'm not fit company." Aaron Parker studied her face for a long moment. "What I know is that Walter Blackwell has a reputation that stretches to Denver, and it ain't for his honesty." He extended a gloved hand. "My sister runs our household. You'd be welcome to shelter with us until the storm passes." Abigail hesitated. "Why would you help me when my own family wouldn't?" Aaron's expression hardened. "Your family left you in shame," he said, his voice low and steady. "Then I'll give you pride again." He paused, his eyes holding hers. "Everyone deserves the chance to stand tall on their own 2 feet, Miss Jameson." Something in his words, or perhaps it was the honest way he said them, made her reach for his hand. With surprising gentleness for such a large man, he helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. "Hold tight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as he reached around her for the reins. As they rode away from Reidsville, Abigail felt something shift inside her, fear giving way to a tentative hope. She didn't know what awaited her at the Parker Ranch, but it had to be better than what she'd left behind. The snow was falling heavily by the time they reached the ranch house, a sturdy two-story structure with warm light glowing from its windows. A barn and several outbuildings created a protective semicircle around a central yard. Aaron helped Abigail down from the horse, keeping a steadying hand at her elbow as her feet touched the ground. The front door opened before they reached it, and a young woman with the same green eyes as Aaron appeared. "You're back early," she stopped, noticing Abigail. "Oh, hello there." "Alice, this is Miss Abigail Jameson," Aaron said, ushering Abigail toward the warmth of the house. "She needs a place to stay during the storm." Alice Parker's welcoming smile showed no sign of the judgment Abigail had come to expect. "Well, you're just in time. I've got a stew that's been simmering all day." Inside, the Parker home was modest but comfortable, with handcrafted furniture and colorful quilts that spoke of care and attention. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the smell of fresh bread and beef stew made Abigail's stomach growl embarrassingly. "Let me take your things," Alice said, reaching for Abigail's carpetbag. "You must be frozen through. Come warm yourself while I prepare a room for you." Aaron hung his duster and hat on pegs by the door. Without the heavy coat, Abigail could see he was lean but powerfully built, with the strength that came from hard work rather than leisure. "I'll see to Ranger," he said, referring to his horse. "Be back in a few minutes." Left alone with Alice, Abigail stood awkwardly by the fire, unsure of her place in this unfamiliar home. "Don't worry about my brother," Alice said, misreading her discomfort. "He's always had a soft spot for those in need. Brings home injured animals, hungry ranch hands," she smiled. "And now you." "But he's a gentleman through and through." "It's not that," Abigail said hesitantly. "It's just, do you know who I am? What they're saying about me in town?" Alice's expression softened. "We've heard the talk. Aaron doesn't put much stock in gossip, and neither do I." She touched Abigail's arm gently. "Whatever happened, you're safe here." The simple kindness nearly undid Abigail's composure. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "Thank you." By the time Aaron returned, stamping snow from his boots, Alice had shown Abigail to a small but clean bedroom and lent her a warm flannel nightgown. They sat down to dinner at a rough-hewn table, the stew as delicious as it had smelled. "Have you worked your ranch long?" Abigail asked, trying to be a polite guest. 5 years, Aaron replied. "It was our father's before he passed. We raise cattle mostly, some horses too." "Aaron breaks the wild ones himself," Alice added with obvious pride. "He's got a special touch with them." "Just patience," Aaron said, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Animals know when you respect them." The conversation flowed easily, neither of the Parkers pressing Abigail about her circumstances. After dinner, exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her, the emotional toll of the day catching up all at once. "You should rest," Alice said, noticing Abigail struggling to keep her eyes open. "Tomorrow will look brighter." In the small bedroom, Abigail changed into the borrowed nightgown and slipped beneath heavy quilts. Outside, the wind howled around the eaves, but inside she was warm for the first time in days. As sleep claimed her, she wondered what tomorrow would indeed bring. The storm raged for 3 days, keeping them mostly housebound. Abigail insisted on helping with chores, cooking alongside Alice, mending clothes, learning the rhythm of ranch life. Aaron spent much of his time in the barn and outbuildings, caring for livestock, but joined them each evening for meals and afterward by the fire, where he'd sometimes read aloud from one of the books that lined a small shelf. On the morning of the 4th day, Abigail woke to sunshine streaming through her window. The world outside was transformed pristine white snow glittering under a clear blue sky. After breakfast, she bundled up in clothes borrowed from Alice and ventured outside, breathing deeply of the crisp, clean air. She found Aaron by the corral, where he was working with a spirited bay mare who pranced nervously at the end of a long lead rope. "Morning, Miss Jameson," he called, tipping his hat. "Beautiful day after all that bluster." "It certainly is," she agreed, leaning on the corral fence. "What are you doing with her? This is Firefly. She's got potential to be a fine cutting horse, but she's been mistreated." "Trying to teach her that not all humans mean her harm." As he spoke, Aaron moved slowly, his voice a constant gentle murmur as he gradually shortened the distance between himself and the nervous animal. Abigail watched, fascinated by his patience and the obvious care he took. "How do you know she'll ever trust you?" Aaron glanced at her, something unspoken passing between them. "Time and consistency. You earn trust by being trustworthy, showing up every day and proving your intentions." He returned his attention to the horse, eventually coaxing her close enough to touch her neck, rewarding her with soft words of praise. Abigail couldn't help but draw parallels to her own situation, wary, skittish, uncertain who to trust after betrayal. "With the roads clearing, I should return to town tomorrow," she said suddenly. Aaron's hand stilled on the mare's neck. "Is that what you want? I need to find work, a place to stay. I can't impose on your hospitality forever." "You're no imposition," he said quietly. "But I understand needing to stand on your own." That evening, as they sat by the fire, Aaron cleared his throat. "I've been thinking, Miss Jameson, we could use help around here. Alice has too much on her shoulders with the house and the accounts, and we'll be busy come calving season." Abigail looked up from her mending, surprised. "Are you offering me employment, Mr. Parker?" "I am. Room, board, and a fair wage." His eyes met hers steadily. "No charity, just an honest exchange." "I don't know the first thing about ranching," she admitted. Alice smiled. "You're a quick learner, and it would be nice to have another woman around." Abigail considered the offer, weighing her limited options against the unexpected kindness of these strangers. "I accept with gratitude, but only until I find my footing." Aaron nodded, satisfaction in his eyes. "That's settled then." The next morning, instead of preparing to return to Reedsville, Abigail accompanied Aaron on a ride around the property. The Parker Ranch comprised several hundred acres of rolling grassland, perfect for cattle grazing in the warmer months. Now it lay under a blanket of snow, broken by stands of pine and aspen. "It's beautiful," Abigail said as they paused atop a ridge overlooking a frozen creek. "It is," Aaron agreed, his breath clouding in the cold air. "My father used to say this land gets in your blood." "I didn't understand until after he was gone." "How did he die?" she asked softly. "Pneumonia 3 winters ago. It was quick." Aaron's gaze remained on the distant mountains. "Left us the ranch, some debts, and his good name. We've managed to keep it all going, but it hasn't been easy." Abigail felt a pang of admiration for this man and his sister, shouldering such responsibility without complaint. "I'm sorry for your loss." He turned to her with a half-smile. "Life happens as it will. We can only choose how we face it." As they rode back, Abigail realized she was looking forward to her new role, to being useful and productive rather than an object of scandal and pity. The weight of her family's rejection was still there, but somehow lighter under the vast Colorado sky. The weeks passed in a rhythm dictated by the needs of the ranch. Abigail learned to help with the feeding, to recognize signs of illness in the animals, to assist Alice with the endless cooking and cleaning that keeping several ranch hands fed required. She even learned to ride properly, with Aaron as a patient teacher. By February, She felt like a different person, stronger, more capable. Her hands calloused from work, but her spirit lighter than it had been since before her world collapsed. She caught occasional glimpses of herself in the mirror and hardly recognized the tanned, confident woman looking back. One evening, as she helped Aaron tend to a calf born early, their hands brushed in the straw of the barn. The simple contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, and when she looked up to find his eyes on her, something unspoken passed between them. "You've come a long way from that day in the snow," he said softly. "Thanks to you and Alice." He shook his head. "No, you did the hard work. We just provided the opportunity." The moment stretched between them, fragile and new, until the calf's mother lowed insistently and broke the spell. Abigail stepped back, suddenly conscious of their proximity. "I should help Alice with supper," she murmured. Aaron nodded, but his eyes followed her as she left the barn. That night, Abigail lay awake, contemplating the feeling that had sparked between them. She'd sworn off men after Walter's betrayal, convinced herself she was better off alone than risking her heart. But Aaron Parker was nothing like Walter Blackwell. Where Walter had been entitled and arrogant, Aaron was humble despite his quiet strength. Where Walter had seen her as a conquest, Aaron saw her as a person worthy of respect. The realization that she was falling in love with him was both exhilarating and terrifying. March brought the first hints of spring and the beginning of calving season in earnest. The days grew longer and busier, often stretching from before dawn until well after dusk. Abigail threw herself into the work, grateful for the exhaustion that let her sleep without dwelling on her growing feelings for Aaron. One crisp morning, she was collecting eggs from the hen house when the sound of approaching horses drew her attention. 3 riders were coming up the lane to the main house, moving with purpose. She recognized the middle rider immediately, Walter Blackwell, sitting tall in an expensive saddle, flanked by 2 men she didn't know. Fear and anger twisted in her stomach. She set down her basket of eggs and hurried toward the house, but Aaron had already emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he called, his voice neutral but his stance alert. Walter reined his horse to a stop, looking down at Aaron with thinly veiled contempt. "Parker, I hear you've been harboring Abigail Jameson." "Miss Jameson works for me," Aaron replied evenly. "What business is that of yours?" Walter's gaze shifted to Abigail and his lip curled. "So this is where you've been hiding, Abby. Your father's been beside himself with worry." The lie was so blatant Abigail almost laughed. "My father made his feelings quite clear when he put me on that stage with nothing but a carpetbag." "He's had a change of heart," Walter said smoothly. "He sent me to bring you home." Abigail crossed her arms. "I am home." Walter's face darkened. "Don't be difficult. You've made your point. Now it's time to return to civilization before your reputation is beyond saving." "My reputation?" This time she did laugh, the sound sharp in the morning air. "You destroyed that when you lied about me." The 2 men with Walter shifted uncomfortably, and Aaron moved closer to Abigail's side. "I think you'd best be on your way, Blackwell," Aaron said quietly. "Miss Jameson has made her wishes clear." Walter's hand drifted to his gun belt. "This isn't your concern, rancher." "The lady says she's staying," Aaron replied, his voice still calm but with steel beneath it. "That makes it my concern." For a tense moment, Abigail feared violence would erupt in the yard. Then Walter relaxed his posture, a calculating smile spreading across his face. "Have it your way for now. But Jameson Bank holds the note on quite a few properties around here, including yours, Parker. Would be a shame if those loans suddenly needed reviewing." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Think on that." With a final contemptuous look at Abigail, he wheeled his horse around and rode away, his companions following. Abigail's hands were shaking. "Aaron, I'm so sorry. I never meant to bring trouble to your door." Aaron's expression was grim as he watched the riders disappear. "You have nothing to apologize for, but your loans will manage," he said firmly. "I won't let him threaten us, and I certainly won't let him force you to go anywhere against your will." His protective stance stirred something deep within her. "Thank you," she whispered. Aaron's face softened as he turned to her. "I meant what I said that first day, Abigail, about giving you back your pride. That means standing with you, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard." That night, after a subdued dinner where they explained the situation to Alice, Abigail found herself unable to sleep. She slipped downstairs for a cup of tea and was surprised to find Aaron still awake, studying paperwork at the kitchen table. "You should rest," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, a weary smile crossing his face. "Same could be said for you." Abigail put the kettle on the stove. "What are you working on?" "Trying to make sense of our finances. Blackwell wasn't bluffing about the loans." She sat across from him, guilt weighing heavily. "This is all my fault." Aaron reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "None of this is your fault, Abigail. The actions of men like Walter Blackwell are their own responsibility." His touch was warm, comforting. "Still, I should go. I won't be the cause of you losing your home." "And where would you go?" he asked quietly. "Denver, maybe. It's big enough that I could start fresh, find work." Aaron's fingers tightened slightly on hers. "Is that what you want, to leave?" The real question hung unspoken between them. Abigail looked into his eyes, seeing concern, determination, and something deeper that made her heart race. "No," she admitted. "It's the last thing I want." Aaron exhaled slowly. "Then we fight, together." The next morning brought another visitor, this time the town's sheriff, Thomas Grant, a weathered man with a reputation for fairness. Aaron met him in the yard while Abigail watched anxiously from the porch. "Morning, Parker," the sheriff greeted him. "Need a word if you've got time." They spoke for several minutes, their conversation too low for Abigail to hear. Finally, Aaron nodded and gestured toward the house. As they approached, she straightened her spine, determined to face whatever was coming with dignity. "Miss Jameson," Sheriff Grant touched his hat. "Been some time since we've seen you in town." "Sheriff," she acknowledged. "What brings you to the Parker Ranch? Matter of public record, actually." He glanced at Aaron. "May I speak freely?" Aaron nodded. "Abigail knows everything about our situation." The sheriff looked between them with assessing eyes. "Walter Blackwell came to me yesterday, making noise about forcibly returning you to your father's custody. Said you were being held here against your will." Indignation flared hot in Abigail's chest. "That's absurd. I'm here by choice, employed as a ranch hand." "That's what I figured," Grant said mildly. "Told him you're a grown woman free to live where you please." He didn't much care for that answer. "I imagine not," Aaron said dryly. "There's more," the sheriff continued. "Got word this morning that Jameson Bank is calling in loans throughout the county, starting with yours, Parker." Aaron's jaw tightened. "How soon?" 30 days. Abigail gasped. "That's impossible. How could anyone raise that kind of money so quickly?" "That's the point," Aaron said grimly. "They don't expect us to be able to pay." Sheriff Grant nodded. "It's legal, but barely. I'd wager they're hoping to force your hand." He looked at Abigail with something like apology. "Some folks are saying this trouble wouldn't have come if I wasn't here," she finished for him. "People talk," he said simply. "Just thought you should know what's brewing." After the sheriff left, Aaron paced the porch, his expression thunderous. "They can't just bully us into submission. There has to be a way." Abigail felt a cold certainty settling over her. "There is, I go back." "No." The word was sharp, immediate. "That's exactly what they want. And they're using you to get to me. I won't let them ruin you and Alice because of me." Aaron stopped pacing, turning to face her fully. "Abigail, listen to me. What they're doing isn't about you, not really. It's about power and control. If we give in now, they'll only find other ways to exert it later." She knew he was right, but the solution seemed impossible. "Then what do we do? You said yourself you can't raise that money in 30 days. A determined light entered Aaron's eyes. "Maybe not alone. But we're not without friends." The next week was a flurry of activity. Aaron rode to neighboring ranches, calling in favors and proposing partnerships. Alice pored over their accounts, looking for any assets they could leverage. Abigail wrote letters to newspapers in Denver, to the territorial governor's office, to anyone who might listen to a story about banking improprieties and personal vendettas. News traveled fast in ranching country. By the end of the week, 3 neighboring ranchers had come to offer support, bringing with them tales of similar strong-arm tactics from Jameson Bank. A reporter from the Denver Chronicle arrived to interview Abigail about her experiences, both with Walter Blackwell's false accusations and the bank's retaliatory measures. "You've started something bigger than us," Aaron told her one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch. "These men have been using their influence to control the whole county for years. Now people are finally speaking up." "I never wanted to be at the center of a controversy," she said softly. Aaron's hand found hers, his calloused fingers intertwining with her own. "Sometimes life puts us exactly where we need to be, even if it's not where we would have chosen." She looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her. "I'm glad life put me here with you." His eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." As she lay in bed that night, Abigail realized that despite the uncertainty hanging over them, she hadn't felt this alive, this purposeful in years, perhaps ever. Whatever happened with the bank and Walter Blackwell, she wouldn't trade these months at the Parker Ranch for anything. 2 weeks into their 30-day deadline, word came that the Territorial Banking Commissioner was investigating Jameson Bank for potentially illegal loan practices. 3 days later, Jeremiah Jameson himself arrived at the ranch, looking older and grayer than Abigail remembered. Aaron met him in the yard, standing protectively between him and the house where Abigail watched from the window. "Mr. Parker," her father said formally, "I'd like to speak with my daughter." "That's up to her," Aaron replied. Inside, Abigail's heart pounded painfully. She hadn't seen her father since that awful day in December when he'd handed her a train ticket and told her not to come back. Part of her wanted to refuse him, to let him feel a fraction of the rejection she'd experienced. But another part, the part that still remembered him teaching her to ride her first pony, reading to her by the fire on winter evenings, needed to hear what he had to say. She stepped onto the porch, her steps measured and deliberate. "Father." Jeremiah Jameson removed his hat, revealing thinning hair that had gone completely silver since she'd last seen him. "Abigail." His voice caught slightly. "You look well." "I am well," she said, moving to stand beside Aaron. "What do you want?" Her father glanced uncomfortably at Aaron. "Could we speak privately?" "Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of Aaron," she replied firmly. "He and Alice have been more family to me these past months than you were." The barb struck home. Her father flinched visibly. "I deserve that," he admitted, "and worse." The admission surprised her. "You've come a long way to state the obvious." "I've come to apologize." He looked down at the hat in his hands. "And to tell you that I've withdrawn the demand for immediate repayment of the Parker loans." Abigail exchanged a startled look with Aaron. "Why?" "Because I was wrong," her father said simply. "About many things, but most of all about you." I chose to believe Walter Blackwell over my own daughter, and I'll carry that shame for the rest of my days." The words she'd longed to hear for months now rang hollow. "What changed your mind?" "Several things." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "The Banking Commission's investigation revealed that Walter had attempted similar behavior with other young women, and your letters to the newspapers forced me to see how my banking practices have been. Overly aggressive." Aaron's expression remained skeptical. "Convenient timing, Mr. Jameson." "I understand your suspicion," her father replied. "But the truth is, I've been blind to Walter's character, to the harm I was causing, and most unforgivably, to my daughter's integrity." He stepped forward, holding out a folded paper to Abigail. "This is the deed to 40 acres adjoining the Parker property to the east. Good grazing land with a year-round spring. It's yours, Abigail, free and clear. A poor attempt to make amends, but it's what I can offer." Abigail took the paper with trembling fingers. "I don't understand." "It's your inheritance, given now rather than later. Do with it what you will." His eyes moved between her and Aaron. "I gather you found a home here." The implication wasn't lost on either of them. Aaron straightened beside her. "Mr. Jameson, I care deeply for your daughter," he said, his voice steady. "But any reconciliation between you is her decision, not mine." Jeremiah nodded. "Fair enough." He turned back to Abigail. "I won't ask your forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. But I hope someday you might consider allowing me to try." Abigail felt years of hurt and anger warring with a lifetime of love for the man who had raised her. "I can't promise anything," she said finally, "but I won't close the door entirely." Relief softened her father's features. "That's more than I deserve." He settled his hat back on his head. "I'll leave you be then. The Banking Commission and I have much to discuss about the future of Jameson Bank and about Walter Blackwell's role in it." After he'd gone, Abigail stood motionless, the deed clutched in her hand, emotions tumbling through her too quickly to name. "Are you all right?" Aaron asked softly. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I never expected." She gestured vaguely at the paper in her hand. "Any of this." Aaron's arm slipped around her shoulders, solid and reassuring. "Whatever you decide about your father, you're not alone in it." She leaned into his strength, feeling some of her confusion settle. "I know." That evening, with the immediate threat to the ranch lifted, they celebrated with a special dinner. Alice had prepared all of Abigail's favorites and even opened a bottle of wine her father had laid down years before. "To new beginnings," Alice proposed, raising her glass. "And unexpected gifts," Aaron added, his eyes lingering on Abigail. Later, as Alice cleared the dishes, Aaron suggested a walk to Abigail. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. They strolled toward the corral, where Firefly nickered softly in recognition. "She's come a long way," Abigail observed, reaching to stroke the mare's velvety nose. "We all have," Aaron replied. He leaned against the fence rail, his profile strong in the moonlight. "Abigail, there's something I need to say." Her heart quickened. "Yes." "That land your father gave you, it's good land. Combined with ours, it would make the ranch more viable than ever." He turned to face her fully. "But that's not why I'm glad you have it." "No," he took a deep breath. "I'm glad because it means you have choices, real choices. You can sell it and go to Denver or anywhere else you might want. Start whatever life you dream of." Understanding dawned. "You think I'm staying because I have nowhere else to go. I think you deserve to choose your life, not have it chosen for you by circumstances." His voice was low, intense. "I want you to stay, Abigail, more than I've wanted anything, but only if it's what you truly want." In that moment, looking at this man who had given her back her pride, her sense of self-worth, and now was offering her freedom to choose her own path, Abigail knew exactly what she wanted. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him. "Aaron Parker, from the moment you found me in that snowstorm, you've never once made me feel like I owed you anything. You've treated me with respect, with kindness, and with honesty." Her hand came up to rest against his cheek. "I choose you. I choose this life, this ranch, this future we could build together." The joy that blazed across his face took her breath away. "Are you sure?" In answer, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. His arms came around her instantly, strong and secure, as he returned her kiss with a tenderness that made her heart soar. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Abigail Jameson. Have since you started talking back to me about proper horse grooming that second week you were here." She laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "I love you too, even when you're being stubborn about fence repairs. Especially then," he teased before growing serious again. "I don't have much to offer except this land, hard work, and my heart." "It's everything I need," she assured him. Under the vast Colorado sky, with the promise of spring in the air, they sealed their promise with another kiss. The wedding took place in May, when the meadows were carpeted with wildflowers, and new calves frolicked on strengthening legs. Alice had outdone herself decorating the ranch house and yard, with help from neighboring women who had rallied around Abigail's cause during the banking dispute. To Abigail's surprise, her father attended, standing awkwardly to one side during the ceremony performed by a circuit preacher. Afterward, as guests mingled and celebrated, he approached the newlyweds. "Congratulations," he said formally, extending his hand to Aaron. "You've gained a remarkable woman as your wife." "I know exactly how fortunate I am, sir," Aaron replied, shaking his hand firmly. Jeremiah turned to Abigail, hesitation in his eyes. "You make a beautiful bride, daughter." "Thank you for coming," she said, finding she meant it. The anger that had sustained her for so long had begun to fade, leaving room for something new to grow in its place, not blind forgiveness, but perhaps a cautious reconciliation. "I'm opening a new branch of the bank in Denver," her father told her. "Fresh start, better practices. Walter Blackwell is no longer associated with any of my businesses." He cleared his throat. "I hope. Perhaps you might visit someday, both of you." Aaron's hand found Abigail's, their fingers interlacing. "We might do that," she said. "Someday." It was enough for now. Her father nodded, understanding the boundaries she was setting, and moved away to give them space with other well-wishers. "Are you happy?" Aaron asked later as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. Abigail looked around at the ranch that had become her sanctuary, at Alice who had become her sister in all but blood, and finally at the man who held her in his arms, the man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "Completely," she answered, and stretched up to kiss him amid the cheers of their guests. 1 year later, Abigail stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching Aaron work with a new colt in the early morning light. Her hand rested on her swelling belly, where their first child grew stronger each day. So much had changed in 18 months. The Parker Jameson Ranch was thriving. With the addition of her land and strategic partnerships Aaron had formed during their battle with the bank. Alice had married a kind doctor from the next town over and divided her time between their homes. Even her relationship with her father had slowly mended, built on new respect and more honest communication. But the most profound change was within herself. The young woman who had stood abandoned in the snow, crushed by shame and rejection, was gone. In her place stood Abigail Parker, rancher's wife, respected member of the community and soon-to-be mother. A woman who knew her own worth. Aaron looked up, catching sight of her on the porch. He said something to the ranch hand working with him, then jogged toward the house, his face lighting with the smile he reserved just for her. "Good morning, Mrs. Parker," he said, taking the porch steps two at a time. "You're up early." "Your son was restless," she replied, placing his hand against the spot where the baby kicked vigorously. Aaron's expression of wonder never failed to melt her heart. "Strong like his mother, and stubborn like his father," she teased, leaning into his embrace. He chuckled, dropping a kiss on the top of her head. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he still posed occasionally, as if making sure she remained content with the life they'd built. Abigail looked up at him, at the man who had given her pride again, who had helped her find strength she never knew she possessed, who loved her completely and without reservation. "Not a single one," she answered truthfully. "Every step, even the painful ones, led me here to you, to us, to this life we're making together." Aaron's arms tightened around her. "I think that's what love is supposed to do," he said softly. "Not complete us, but make us more fully ourselves." As the sun rose higher over their land, Abigail Parker knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not just in this place, but in the heart of the man beside her, and in the woman she had become through loving him.